Hey guys, I'm Chris.
Hey everybody, I'm Robert.
And we are the Film Flamers.
And we
have been overlooked.
As we have for far too long. And we're bringing you one of the most anticipated episodes every year. We are here to talk about the Overlook Film Festival, which this was our fourth visit to.
Yes, we made a pilgrimage to New Orleans, the most haunted city in America, or so they say. And we watched 13 movies over like 3 days, 3.5 days.
Yeah. Really the bulk of it in 3 days.
Yeah, this is the most movie watching I think that we've done at any of these festivals. Like, we did not have much free time at all.
And we didn't. We really did all the research for y'all and are here to talk about the 13 movies that we have seen that you can look forward to either watching or in some cases maybe waiting for a little bit based on our reviews and such.
And it was not a bad year at all. And you know what? It's never really been a bad year for as far as movies at the Overlook.
No.
The Overlook itself, the festival, has had its problems, but this year went very smoothly.
That's right. We did not have an issue seeing any of the movies that were on our list and added some along the way. The biggest change they made was a reservation system, which worked, in my opinion, flawlessly.
Yes. So we got to see everything we want to see with good seats. We reserved well in advance, and then we got to reserve within 2 hours of some of the others.
That's right.
So yeah, it worked the way it was intended.
And as they promised, there were more theaters at their disposal, and they utilized those. So it seemingly, no matter how long the line was, even though we were at the front of it just about every single time, everyone got to go see the movie in some spillover theater or something. So bravo, Overlook Film Festival.
Also, this is the first year that we have taken advantage of going to the Uptown Britannia Theater instead of the main venue, which is at Canal Place in New Orleans by the French Quarter. And so we were able to see a biggie at that one.
That's right. A biggie and one of my favorites from the festival.
Yeah. And so this year it's usually some years are pretty intermixed. This was more like a bell curve where we got a really quite a lot of great films on Saturday.
Yeah. Still,
I really bolstered my top 10, fleshed out. So a lot of Overlooked films are going to end up on I think the top 10 for the year, as they sometimes do, but especially this year. And so I can't wait to talk about them. But how are we going to do this? Are we going to do it in, let's say, watch order?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best because I think ranking things is probably better saved for a different conversation, you know?
Yeah.
So first of all, the very first movie that we caught at the Overlook was on Thursday night, so opening night. We did not catch the opening night film, which is Drop, because that's playing in the theaters or will be like within like a week.
Yeah.
So
and we definitely wanted to save ourselves for things that weren't immediately going to be released upon our exit from New Orleans.
That is correct. And the first thing that we watched was I think it's a conglomerate of other Asian countries all got together along with the United States and Britain to make a movie called Monster Island. Or
yeah, I don't want to make it sound like it's big budget because it's not. It's just a bunch of different production companies got a little slice of the pie, right, for this. And Monster Island, also known as Ikan.
That's right.
For some reason. And I don't think that's a direct translation.
No, I think that's the name of the folklore or whatever the monster that was in the movie.
Which is essentially not Swamp Thing.
It's like the Gill Man from Creature from the Black
Lagoon, pretty much, or Enemy Mine or something, which we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So this is directed by Mike William and actors Dean Fujioka, who played Saito, the Japanese, trader. And this takes place in World War II.
Yep.
And then there's a quote-unquote American soldier played by Callum Woodhouse named Bronson. And he is actually British. Did not even attempt an American accent.
He's a very, very British actor playing an American.
Yeah. And that kind of, I don't know, some people like not really great for an American audience. Also, anyway, the background of this movie is it's World War II. It's kind of the naval battles and such. And so a bunch of prisoner ships were bombed as part of the process, right? Because they were mistaken for actual like warships, right?
Right.
And so this one was attacked, and there is essentially two survivors. I mean, there's more survivors than that, but like for the sake of the story.
And they wash up on this island where they free themselves from being shackled together, but they are not alone on this seemingly deserted island, as there is some sort of monster.
Yeah, the monster from the Black Lagoon, and it's very, skip over Buffy episode style man in a suit.
Very much so. And I think, so as we get into obviously we're not going to spoil everything about these movies because they haven't even been released yet, y'all. But just briefly, the monster in this movie, in my opinion, looked like trash.
It did.
And it was not believable whatsoever.
Nope.
And it was really taking me out of the movie about how, because they really kept it in the shadows for the beginning parts of this movie, the beginning moments. And I was waiting for a reveal to what this monster looked like. And then it finally was there. And I was just like, God, I feel like my 6-year-old nephew could have created a better fucking costume. But other than that, the movie itself, to me, committed the cardinal sin of film, and that is it bored me to tears.
I was borified.
You were borified. I feel like we were all borified.
Yeah, it had some merit. I gave it 2.5 stars, though. I couldn't go any higher than that.
And I gave it 2 stars, and that is not it's a very rare thing for me to give something less than 3 stars. And this movie just did it only because I was so bored. And honestly, I didn't care that much about the characters, and I kind of was waiting for the movie to be over.
I feel like it needed a little bit of comedy or something with the handcuffing situation. They didn't really utilize any of the tools they had in their tool belt, per se. There was no intrigue of what the island was. There was no, not even hinting at any exposition, which I'm normally okay with, but nothing, other than calling out, or Ikan or whatever. And some of it must have been lost in translation as far as maybe the colloquial understanding of what this place is,
Maybe.
Anyway, we need to move on.
Yeah, I can't sit here and dwell on Monster Island, y'all. But this is coming to Shudder very, very soon. If not the end of April, then in May. So you guys can catch this one pretty quickly.
Yep. Next up, we saw a movie called Dead Lover, which was kind of I want to say experimental, very independent, very artsy, right? The whole thing is almost basically just filmed on a stage.
Yeah.
With some interesting digital and practical effects to make it seem larger scale than it was. It's almost like a one-woman show, although it ended up being I think just 3 people total, just playing different characters. And it was supposed to be horror comedy, right? It's Dead Lover, right? It's about someone who falls in love, and then they try and bring their dead lover back to life, and then it's a whole story about that. And the main character is also the director, Grace Glowicki. And her and Ben Petrie and Leah Doze basically played everyone in this movie.
If you're trying to find something to maybe help you get a grip or grasp on what this movie is, it's a very goofy kind of comedy. And like Chris said, very kind of experimental and kind of set on one kind of stage. So if you think some of the shorter Adult Swim type comedies, that are kind of like that, it's very much like that. And it has some funny moments to it, I laughed several times. But ultimately I felt like the movie was too goofy. And this is coming from someone who really loves goofy fucking comedy.
I really liked its goofiness. I laughed out loud a couple of times. There's several different types of comedy in this, including slapstick. Other than that, it was just really, really cheap and independent. It would never, ever in a million years get a theatrical release.
No.
This is a personal project, right?
It is. And I feel like the people who were involved in this really knew the kind of tone they wanted to have, and I think that they were all given kind of reign as actors to sort of ad lib and create this kind of comedy. And I can appreciate that, you know, for what it is. But like ultimately, again, I found myself getting very, very bored with this movie.
I almost got bored. I gave it a 3. Very kind of middle of the road.
I also gave this 2 stars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just wasn't the movie's biggest fan.
That is shockingly rare for us, for you to rate something a full star below me. Usually you're half star above, almost like clockwork.
The thing is that the audience that we saw this movie with was behind this movie for sure. People were laughing out loud. And I feel like I must have missed something. This was the first movie that we saw on Friday. You know, maybe I was a little tired or something like that because we had just traveled and things like that. But like, I feel like I need to see this one again before I fully commit to a 2-star rating. And hopefully it will get some kind of streaming release because I feel like there really could be an audience for this one. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from seeing this movie because if I were to compare it to Monster Island, it was definitely better than that.
Super niche. I don't know that I could recommend, you know, it to most people. Unless they're really wanting like some sort of, I would actually go and see this as a stage play before I would watch it as a movie again. Yeah,
I feel like if it were presented in a different aspect, it might be better. Yeah. So maybe that's the thing.
Yep.
After that, we caught a movie called The True Beauty of Being Bitten by a Tick.
I feel like they could have gone with about 100 other titles for this.
Yeah, maybe just call it Tick. But this was directed by Pete O's, who had a film playing at the Overlook the very first time that we went called Jessica.
Jessica?
This movie stars Zoe Chow, Callie Hernandez, Jeremy Harris, and James Kusati Moyer. And Zoe Chow was also in Jessica, directed by Pete O's. Okay. So this movie was bizarre, but in a good way. Like I think that, so essentially this movie is about a woman who has had sort of a personal tragedy, and she goes to visit a friend who now lives sort of out in the country away from the city. And as the story progresses, you get to learn more about her relationship with her friend and what is seemingly going on because something seems completely out of place. And she really starts to understand why after she is bitten by a tick while walking through the woods.
Right. And I think this is one of those movies that's really about something else. It's about, you know, the life you give up when you're becoming a mother or a parent or settling down. It's kind of about the fears you might have when settling down, right?
Yeah.
And it's super forgettable to me. Like I gave it a 3.5, which seems super high on hindsight.
I gave it 3 stars, and I don't know that I think that 3.5 or even 3 is too high for this movie. I think that it's really well made.
I wasn't bored. It was well acted. It was well made, well shot.
And it really held my interest a lot because I wanted to figure out what was going on with all of this, you know, and things were getting seemingly like weirder and weirder. And the movie really is it's a vibe, you know?
Yeah.
And like there was some interesting sound design going on in it.
Very substance-like.
Yeah. And kind of like gross in certain moments. But you're right. I think there's more going on under the surface of this. Like it really is a deeper sort of allegory for life lessons.
Yeah. And there's some other stuff in there too. There's like some stuff with like some gay guys and I don't know what kind of point they're trying to make about any of that. And there's other movies that have stuck with me that I've thought about and cared to think about more. And with this one, I just don't care to.
Yeah. I never saw Jessica, even after we watched the movies of the Overlook that year. So it's not one that I caught. I don't really know this director that well, but
it's me, Jessica.
But I'm very glad that the Overlook is, you know, paying attention to the directors that have come before and have shown movies at their festival before and saying, hey, come back and show other people your continued work. You know, I think that's really good of them. And that happened again later on. We'll talk about it in the movie.
That's right. So on the upward trend, we got to see a movie called Hallow Road, And this is directed by Babak Anvari, who did a movie called Wounds and a movie called Under the Shadow. You saw Wounds, and it was aight.
Yeah, it was aight.
I saw Under the Shadow, which I really, really liked. I gave it 4 stars back in the day, a couple of years ago, I think 2020. And this was about the Iran-Iraq war, and a bomb falls on a building, and then, like, did it bring a ghost or a haunting? Genuinely creepy, great story, great relationships, great characters, excellently shot. Anyway, this director comes back to do this movie, Hallow Road, which stars Rosamund Pike, right? Who, of course, is good in everything she has ever done.
Yes.
And Matthew Rhys, right? And so this is essentially about a married couple that gets a call from their daughter who had escaped into the night, driving one of their cars, taking one of their cars out of anger because they had an argument. I'm guessing about maybe having an abortion or keeping a baby or whatever. Because
she's made up her mind. She's keeping her.
Yeah. Papa don't preach. And so Papa does preach and hops into the car with Rosamund, who is trying to preach at her about how to save the life of a woman she just ran the fuck over. So they're like trying to talk their daughter how to get through this emergency on the phone while they're trying to like drive into this like ancient England forest, you know, to try and help her. So the entirety of this movie, outside of the very, very beginning, happens on this road in the car over speakerphone. And let me tell you, when I say it is so well done, you wouldn't even ever notice that you're not, you know, that you're missing out on multiple locations or anything. Because the way they shoot it and the way it's acted and the story and the dialogue is done in such a way that is just enthralling the entire way through. And let me tell you, one of my favorite genres, if it was a subgenre of horror, is subtle supernatural. And I love that. And that's part of this. And it's almost like a horror audiobook or something, but you're able to watch a theatricality of it. You know, I don't know. It's one of my top favorites of the year so far. And certainly up to this point, my favorite of the festival.
I agree with you completely. I feel like Hallow Road was really, really good. And the thing is that I don't normally like movies that take this like sort of like subtle supernatural turn. I usually, when that happens,
you want it to shit or get off the pot.
Well, I want it to stay real. You know, this movie has been grounded in realism the entire time. I'd rather you keep it that way. And then sometimes, on the very, very few occasions, it works. And it works for this. And I think it's because these two actors are just so good in this movie, and they really draw you into everything that's happening, you know, and all of it is dialogue driven. And it's no secret that I enjoy movies that are really heavy on the dialogue, that have a very small to very few locations and a very limited cast. And that's exactly what this movie is. We had 2 people in a car for a whole movie.
But it has to be good, right? And it just continues to belabor the point, really, that you can make, as long as your story, your dialogue, your acting is good, like you don't have to have any fucking budget. You know, because I can't imagine that this was made for more than, you know, a couple $100,000.
No, it couldn't have been much. And the thing is that this movie works also because of its script and screenplay. And like the story is continuously moving, much like the car is continuously moving, and the story is unfolding in these different ways. And you never know exactly what's going to happen. It's super intense. And I just really, really had a great time watching it. And I gave it 5 stars.
I gave it a 4.5. Do you know when this is going to come out on streaming or theatrical release even?
Soon, I think. I think it's getting a very limited theatrical release, and I don't know if a streaming service has already picked it up or not. Shudder did not, I know, but
feels like there could be some buzz about this when it comes out, like kind of like Bird Watcher did or whatever the fuck with Sandra Bullock.
Oh, Blackbird? No. Bird Box. Yeah,
something like that, where people are telling each other to watch it. I feel like that's going to go maybe a little viral. I don't know that it's going to explode, you know, but depending on how it's released and how much marketing goes in it, and maybe like if they do some sort of like whisper campaign, maybe it'll have some legs. And I'm hoping it does. Either way, even if it has the smallest of theatrical releases, it's going to make some fucking money, because this thing cannot have been made for much.
I feel like it'll play better in like Britain and Europe.
It's almost like this year's Oddity, but it's even simpler, you know?
Yeah, and this movie is very, very simple, but it's just super, super good. So I cannot stress to you enough, listeners, when you can watch Hallow Road, you need to do so.
Yep, well, it's going to be on our top 10, I believe. I think it's going to have legs enough to survive other high rating movies the rest of the year although it's only been a third of the way through the year.
Yeah, I don't give a whole. I mean, I give a handful of 5 stars throughout the year typically, and they tend to always end up toward the top of my list at the end of the year. So I'm sure that would be the case.
That's how numbers work.
That is how numbers work. I just explained it to everyone well ahead of our year-end episode. After that, the final movie we watched that day was a film called Rosario, which was directed by Felipe Vargas, which is his feature debut film. This film starred Emerald Tobia and David Dastmalchian.
Yeah, and he's kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
And this is kind of a bit part for him, so I wonder how long ago this was actually shot. Because the guy came up, most of these we got to talk to the directors, right? Mm-hmm. And the directors came up and he's like, I shot this when I was 25. So it sounded like it was a few years ago.
Yeah, I think it was.
So I wonder if he just held on to it until he could finally get into festivals and maybe get a better release.
And it is getting a theatrical release.
Yep.
So essentially, this movie is about a young woman who has grown into a very successful life and has sort of sided with her father during a tumultuous divorce and have lost contact with her mother, who's now deceased, and her grandmother, who becomes deceased at the beginning of this film. And she is summoned to her grandmother's apartment where she lived to sort of watch over the body during a blizzard until an ambulance can come to collect the corpse.
Now, this all sounds very familiar. There was a movie that came out a couple of years ago about someone who had to watch a body. It was Night Watch or something.
Yeah, and that was more of
vigil.
The vigil.
Vigil. Yeah, because you have to make a vigil and stay with the body for something like 24 hours. This is kind of a Jewish thing.
Yeah,
and that was fucking freaky.
That was scary
until the last 30 minutes where he finds a projector explaining the whole plot. I fucking hate exposition like that. Anyway, and that was better than this.
It was. Obviously,
David Dastmalchian plays a random neighbor.
Yeah, he's really barely in it. He's mostly talking about an air fryer the entire time. The movie itself obviously starts to grow legs when we learn more about this grandmother's sort of religious practices and how she may or may not have cursed her granddaughter. And so there's a little air of mystery and some spooky things going on in the apartment.
Yeah, and there's some we're approaching Sam Raimi, we're approaching Drag Me to Hell levels of dead body play, or gag rather, and but it doesn't quite get there for me. I really wanted it to lean into that because this actress, when she was doing good at her job, was best when it was a little comedic, right?
Yeah, and I feel like that would have made the movie better. It really I needed some laughs, you know what I mean? It was far, far too serious. And it didn't really need to be. They should have taken a page out of Raimi's book, in my opinion. But
it's popcorn horror, and I think it'll do fine.
I think it'll do fine if they craft a really good trailer. I think it will draw people in. But I feel like ultimately people might be a little disappointed in this movie as a whole.
Yeah.
Now, I was kind of bored while watching it. And the thing that I didn't like the most was its script, because it seemed like every time a person would say something, someone would echo it back. Like another character would say it back, either as a question
it was filler or
as
something.
a repeat. Yeah.
Also for me, it was pacing. It didn't escalate, right? You'd have, I think somewhere in the middle, there's 3 different gags where she's with the body and something else happens. Mm-hmm. But they kind of seem almost out of order with how they escalate, and it doesn't really move anything forward. No. And I just felt like we were treadmilling. We were just walking in place inside the story. And I'm like, do something that matters, please.
Yeah. And until they get to the end, it's twist after twist after twist. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of whiplashy. Also, I think...
you could see coming from a mouth.
For real. I think it's also important to note that during the screening of this film, someone within that mall pulled a fire alarm. Yeah. And we had to pseudo-evacuate and then get let back in. So we may have missed 3, 4, 5 minutes
of it. The director up and left, his assistant up and left. The only people that stayed in the theater were the Boulet brothers. who looked utterly bored.
Yeah, and they were like, we're not getting up for this fire alarm. We're just going to burn here. Like Rosario. What did you rate this movie?
I gave it a 3.
I gave it 2.5.
Jesus. What is happening?
I don't know.
With our ratings.
I mean, and again, it could be situational. I will watch it again, but it was the end of the day. It was the last screening. I was tired. We had to get up to go, maybe evacuate for a fire alarm. And I really thought to myself, there's no need for us to come back from this fire alarm if it's a false alarm.
Or just, why don't we just stay seated? At least we be comfortable and die.
That's right. But I don't know. I feel like some people might like this movie and some people might not. It's subjective.
Yeah. The next day, we were treated with a movie called Good Boy, which you might have heard of because it premiered at South by Southwest to some buzz.
It did. In fact, I'm going to open up a drink for Good Boy because I am happy to talk about this. Buzz indeed from South by Southwest where it premiered.
Yeah, this is directed by Ben Leonberg with his feature debut, and this is his actual dog, Good Boy, right? That's what it's named after. And, of course, the actor is Indy.
Indy the dog.
He's the goodest boy. And, so this is essentially a horror movie, supernatural horror, basically from the dog's perspective. Think like the dog from Poltergeist and like their perspective, but this is more centered around one person. Right. And it's alluded that this haunting is more family based than location based because you see some shit before he goes off into the wilderness, into his grandfather's cabin, which, you know, his sister, who incessantly calls him to make sure he's okay for good reason, is also thinking is haunted, but he is getting some sort of plague, sickness that will not go away, and it's getting worse when this thing comes after him. And the good boy is trying to warn him, keep him safe, investigate a little bit, again with some pacing issues, but overall an excellent film, and I think an important one, just for how unique it was and how good the animal acting is in this.
The animal acting in
and
this
direction,
is incredible. Like I
almost made us cry too in the first 3 minutes of this movie.
Oh, I did. I cried there's like a montage, you know, of like the dog's life leading up to that point. And I was just like in fucking tears, and I cried at the end of it too. And
I felt like the end could have been a little bit more poignant. It was poignant, but I felt like it needed to be as poignant as the beginning for a good emotional bookend.
Yeah, it did. But I mean, it also there's a moment of realization toward the end too, which is important for the plot. And I think there could have been a little bit more emotional heft. But I don't know. I think this movie is important just because of the way that it's shot. I mean, obviously it's shot from the POV of the dog, and the way that the director described it when he got up in front of us was, you know, have you ever noticed your dog just staring into space? And he's like, well, we made a whole movie about that. Yeah. You know, and
staring into space, barking at nothing, whining for no reason. This is what this movie is about. Right. And so I think it's great. And I'm kind of shocked that no other horror movies have kind of done this before.
Yeah, it seems like that would be a no-brainer, you know, like there's fertile.
But the best ideas seem obvious after the fact. So, I mean, that's obviously I hope this gets theatrical release. I hope it has legs. I hope people talk about it. I hope people see it because I think it's great.
I think that could be a definite fan favorite for horror movie lovers this year. And I also mirror that sentiment. I hope that people go see this movie.
Also some big jumps in this too.
I did jump several times, and I just loved that dog so much. Mm-hmm. I gave this 4 stars.
Me too.
So this is definitely one to check out. Mm-hmm. After Good Boy, we watched a film called Ick. That's ICK, directed by Joseph Kahn, and this was his feature film debut. He's made several shorts. One I think you've seen before, right? A Power Ranger short or something?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's about the Pink Ranger, and all the other Power Rangers have been killed, and it's an R-rated Power Ranger movie with the original Pink Ranger actors.
Well, I didn't even know this thing existed. But this film stars Brandon Routh
of Superman Returns fame.
Mm-hmm. Melina Weissman, whom I have never heard of or seen before, but she plays a younger character named Grace.
And she was great.
And she was excellent. And then Mina Suvari is in this movie.
Right. From American Pie and American Beauty fame.
That's right. So Ick really is about a man who was sort of a high school football star, and he's on to great things like going to college and joining the NFL. But then he has an injury, and he's relegated to teaching at the high school in which he attended as a kid.
Yep.
But there's a strange alien-like plant growing throughout the entirety of this movie that's sort of just existing until it's not.
It's called the Ick. Yeah.
The Ick. And it turns and becomes a little bit more violent and possessy.
Right. But the fun part of this is about, the generational differences, right?
Yeah.
In which case it made us feel very old.
It did.
Right. Brandon Routh is as old as, I think he's between our ages.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they were just the start of the movie in their youth, him and Mina Savari, who looked exactly, they de-aged them both and made them look exactly like they did like back in the day, like in all those movies that we grew up with, you know. But even then, it's like they're supposed to be like our age, but they made them a snag younger, right? Like, so it's like mid 2000s versus like early 2000s or late 90s or something, which would have been more, I don't know, purpose. So everything is like early 2000s punk. All of the music in this movie.
Yeah, it's very emo.
And it's fun. And there's like some interesting generation differences, and it's about family and connection and life and choosing to move on and pivot, you know, and have a happy life regardless, and trying to move on and make intentional choices in your life. I don't know.
Well, and not like hold on to your early years so much.
There was, and it was also kind of a comedy, right? A bit in a big way, really.
Yeah, I laughed a lot.
He really wanted to make the audience know that this was made for people as gateway horror. He wanted to make this for 13 to 16-year-olds, and it works that way. It's for 13-year-olds it's pretty adult, right?
He called it something else though. Like, we use the term gateway, but he called it like beginner horror.
Beginner horror. I was like, it's called gateway horror, buddy. Anyway, because we of course are referencing gateway drugs, right?
Yes.
So maybe that's why he didn't want to call it that. But and I feel like it succeeds on that level. It feels like it could be a classic.
Yeah.
For those people, we're a little old for it. The call outs that like he also wanted to say he's not trying to insult people of either generation. It just is what it is. And they both kind of trade barbs.
Yeah.
Also, we've got some like airplane level like comedy happening in the background with like the school announcements and things like that. And so it's like, you need to watch this movie almost twice just to get all of like the side jokes, which are some of the funniest shit in the movie. But it's like a Goosebumps movie, you know, with some comedy.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, if you want to have a nice horror comedy, night with the kids, like this would be the one to do this year.
Especially watching it with your kids, if there is that kind of generational gap, you know what I mean? There is like a petite sense of like nostalgia going on. Yeah. And like the early 2000s are a little like past my teenage prime, you know, like I'm more late 90s than that, but I still lived during this time period. So this movie made me feel simultaneously old and then have this like nostalgia twinge for that particular time period. You need to watch this movie twice, not only to get all the things, but this movie moves at a very frantic pace. Yeah. And like it feels super fast, but it feels cohesive and everything wraps up. Like it didn't leave me wanting more. I was satisfied with the entire story and the acting and the comedy and like the horror aspects of it. So I mean, like Wild Dead Lover was goofy and should have satisfied me on a comedy level. It really did that for me. Like This is something that I would watch again.
I would too. Although we both give it our stamp of like, this is good acknowledgement, which is a 3.5.
Yep. So I think we both rated it the same for this.
Yep.
Yeah. So check it out though, for sure. I think a lot of people would like it.
Next up, this is our pilgrimage that we spoke of at the beginning of the episode to the Britannia Theater Uptown, which is more of the red carpet kind of area for them to have like press lines and such like that. And so this was kind of like the centerpiece film, right?
Mm-hmm. This was the closing night film, actually. Yeah.
Oh, this is the closing night. Okay. Well, see, I felt like the middle almost.
It did.
Right? Peak of the middle, maybe. But this was Clown in a Cornfield, which the trailers had dropped just a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I think we just talked about the trailer for the first time, literally this Shooting the Flames.
Yep.
And so it's going to be hitting the theater. The word on the street is 2,500 theaters.
Yeah, a lot, actually.
So it's going to be great. Now, this is from director Eli Craig, who's still relatively young, but he's the one that did Tucker and Dale versus Evil and another movie with Adam Scott called Little Evil. Mm-hmm. And if anyone's seen Tucker and Dale versus Evil, you know that this director has talent, right? And knows how to make a horror comedy. And this has Katie Douglas, Carson McCormick, and Vincent Mueller. I have never heard of any of these people before.
Yeah, this young cast is relatively unknown.
But they were great.
Yeah.
And anyway, this is about essentially a clown in a cornfield. But if you see the trailer, you know that there's like a town history that's involved. The clown is from like, what is it, the Beans or something? Or
there's
corn.
They make corn syrup in that town, and the clown was the mascot for the corn syrup brand.
Yeah, printed on the thing. Yeah, and all these seems very middle America. These kids are trying to like entertain themselves, and they're trying to get into social media, and like they're trying to sell the town's mascot as some sort of horror figure. Meanwhile, there's an interesting kind of generational divide happening. Instead of millennials versus Gen Z, like an ick, where there's a contrast that's shown, this is more of a outright adversity between more like, I want to say, Gen X or even boomers.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Against Gen Z and maybe even some millennials thrown in for their parents. So, and it's a little bit more interesting social commentary in that way as well. And I think a lot more relevant to today's politics than maybe Ick was. Ick is supposed to be a little bit more familiar, more, introspective. This is much more look at society, right? And there's some really interesting, horrific and comedic and dramatic moments that have to do with that. And I don't want to spoil any more about this movie because it does turn into things that, I don't want to say it pivots or twists or anything, because it doesn't really, but it escalates in interesting ways.
Yeah, I would agree with you, because half the things that I saw on Letterboxd kept talking about this massive twist like midway through the movie.
Oh yeah, it turns into something else completely. No, not really.
No, it didn't. It just it added a layer to the story.
It does it really quite well. The one thing I don't like about it, my biggest complaint, is that there's a whole 15-minute segment where they're talking about the plot, explaining everything.
Yeah.
When they don't have to. It's my least favorite thing about any horror movie is when they stop everything to people that they don't care would live or die, and the villain just explains the plot to you. And I hate it. Kind of necessary in some cases for that analogy and things like that to happen within, some of the social commentary that's happening. But some of the best lines and monologues in the movie happen around that time. But I feel like they could have done it a little bit better way that just wasn't outright explaining things to the audience.
And I agree with you. I think that's, the thing that kept me from giving it a higher rating was those particular moments. But I think this movie, like you said, is really interesting because it's not just about the generational gap. It really is a movie that's more about a gap in politics and a gap in technology.
Yeah.
And how things like that separate generations and
the people who want to save things versus the people that want to just burn it all down.
Yes. And I don't know. I thought it was really, really good and well done from that regard. But also I thought it was scary. I thought the kills were really good. I thought that the villain was great.
It was funny.
Yeah, it was fucking hilarious. And I just had such a good time. And what a good fucking audience watch that was.
Oh, yeah. If you can see it in a packed theater, do it.
Yeah, because people were clapping and screaming and laughing, and they just seemed so into it. The vibe was just on for that.
There was an article, one of the biggies too. It's Vulture or one of them. Mm-hmm. And it was talking about our audience. And they described us as electric.
We were electric. So, and I'm really glad that this is going to get such a large theatrical release because, when Shudder has a property and, this will come to Shudder and you know that it will eventually, they get sometimes a good kind of theatrical release like Oddity did. But this one's getting a very large one, and this is kind of a first for a Shudder film, and that makes me very excited. And also, this is based on an IP, like a novel that really exploded, and a lot of people read. So I know that they already have kind of a built-in audience, and I think this is just going to be big. And I would definitely say go see this one, especially in the theater if you can.
Could be this year's Black Phone.
Yeah, I would think so. Mm-hmm. What did you rate this one?
4.5.
Samesies.
Wow, twinsies.
Twinsies on this one, 4.5. I thought that it was very good.
Yep, it would have been a 5 if it hadn't had that stupid exposition.
After Clown in a Cornfield, we had kind of a gap. There was no reservation, or we could head back over to Canal Place to catch a later showing of a movie called 40 Acres. And I'm certainly glad that we did.
My God, yes. Because this was just kind of a afterthought. We were like, if we can make it, let's do it. Otherwise, let's have a dinner.
Yep.
And we were still kind of, after Clown in a Cornfield, we're like, let's go. We're locked in, right?
Yeah.
And so we went back to the theater on the other side of town and sat down to watch this, which was directed by R.T. Thorne in a debut, astoundingly, with actors like Danielle Deadwyler, who has been in some other things.
Yeah,
including the latest movie that just hit the theaters,
Woman in the Yard.
Woman in the Yard.
Yeah.
And Katima O'Connor and Michael Green Eyes, Native American actor, and who's been in a couple of things. And yeah, this is essentially post-apocalyptic farmers just trying to survive against cannibals. Cannibal? How do they say it in Canada? They like cannibals, but they have beady eyes and flapping heads.
Ooh, cannibal. Yeah, so cannibals attacking a farm of people who are just trying to survive.
Yeah, but no comedy here. This plays it as serious as a car accident.
And it does it really well.
It does it phenomenally well, and it's probably going to be one of the best, if not the best, horror drama of the year.
I walked out of this movie saying, like, this movie could have some serious fucking Oscar legs if they campaigned properly. It got the right kind of release, especially for that lead actress, Danielle Deadwyler. Like, she was just amazing. And I think the themes in this movie are so good. And there continues to be this, like, generation gap theme happening throughout some of these movies that we've seen at the Overlook. And obviously, you know, when horror filmmakers pick up on something, they run with it. We saw a whole bunch of movies about trauma, you know, for extended number of years.
Certainly the last 2 years we saw a bunch about women's rights, you know, and you know, and their agency.
That's right. And so obviously this kind of continues the trend of, like, what it looks like to sort of pass the torch to another generation of people, and how, like, their concepts of life are different. And I don't know, this movie has a lot to say about a lot of things, and I think it just does it so well. And this is just one of those movies that you can't talk about too much. Otherwise, it will ruin the whole experience.
You've also got to let yourself get into it, allow yourself to just be immersed as much as possible. To me, I felt like this was excellently paced, because whenever I kind of walk out of a normal length movie feeling like I've watched a season of TV, or like I've lived a lot of my life having seen it, you know, trauma or otherwise, like that means it's well structured and well paced. And that this movie is, right? And so definitely highly recommend this as soon as it hits theaters, which I'm hoping it does.
It is. It's coming to the theaters, I think, toward the end of this month, if not in early May.
Sweet.
So definitely go check this one out. It is well worth the watch. It is a very satisfying story. I gave this 5 stars, so a perfect score.
Yep, I gave it 4.5.
So very close to that.
Next up, we saw a movie called It Ends. And this was our first film on the last full day.
Yeah, this was an early Sunday movie.
Yeah, this is directed by Alexander Olam in his debut, coming of age, too.
That's right.
He and his friends made this movie while they were all kind of, I guess, going off to college or coming out of college. I don't know. They were all kind of coming of age entering the adult world. Actors are Phineas Yoon, Akira Jackson, Noah Toth, Mitchell Cole. I think all of these people you're going to see more and more of because they were excellent. And this is a movie, again, that takes place in a car, right? I don't know if we want to call these road trip horrors, but 95% of this movie is inside this car, and it starts off like a creepypasta. They're all coming from college, helping them kind of move across country or what have you. Either a wrong turn is made or the road turns into something else, subtle supernatural. Things start to happen and the road never ends. And what do they do and how do they deal with it and why is it happening and what does it mean? There's a huge like logotherapy aspect to this film, which is of course like man's search for meaning, right? And so there's a lot of that in this. And of all the movies we saw at the festival, this is the one that I kind of stay up thinking about at night, right? And I keep thinking about. And so definitely, I think worthwhile. I think I liked it a lot more than you did.
Yeah.
I also, there is a kind of a segue in almost horror genre, the way it starts versus the way it ends, which I can understand how a lot of people might have a problem with, but I actually kind of enjoyed it, that they've kind of stuck to their guns as far as sticking to the story and the characters versus being a slave to maybe how the genre should have done. And I would have loved to see an alternate ending, maybe eventually if they have one that's more on the horror side. But any more and that's going to spoil it. But I definitely think that this is a standout. I was never bored. I thought it was excellently shot, especially for super young filmmakers.
I thought that like the best things about this movie were the actors for sure. I really was sort of like drawn in by their acting and the characters themselves.
A lot of great dialogue too.
It was really well written, and like it wasn't a terribly made movie. And I feel like if I watch this again, I might give it a higher rating than I ended up giving it. But ultimately, like there was a lot of like existential stuff going on, you know, and it was sort of under the surface of it, and it didn't make me feel good, you know. And I'm not saying that all movies have to, because it's not like 40 Acres made me feel good either, you know. But this movie just had a different kind of vibe than that, and everything seemed like so doomed through all of it. And I don't think that there's nothing unhorrific about this movie. I think that it's very squarely a horror movie in some sort of subgenre, but I don't know. Like ultimately, I didn't have a very good time. Watching this.
And maybe it was just kind of where you are in your life, and could have been how you walked into the theater, or the night's sleep you had before. I don't know.
Yeah,
you know, it's hard to really, like, some of these we're going to rate much higher and much lower when viewing them later on in isolation. Not that we're going to even pick up the ones that are rated below 4 again before the end of the year. I don't know. I hope you do with this one, though, because I have a sneaking suspicion. I mean, it's kind of up your alley, you know, a small cast, single location. You love that. And I feel, for me personally, if a movie can succeed at making me feel something, much less making me think about something, right? And this movie does both. Then it has succeeded on multiple levels in a way that most other movies just can't with me for some reason. Maybe I'm dead inside.
No, I don't think that's it. But I am kind of shocked at my reaction to this movie, because it kind of has my vibe, and it is certainly made in a style that I like. But Chris isn't joking that, you know, we watch these movies at kind of a breakneck speed.
Yeah.
And then by the time you get to like that final day, you know, and you're getting close to the finish line, and you've already seen, you know, like
10 movies.
Yeah. Like eight movies or something like that. Then it's hard to sit down and watch something, you know, and like, on that last day, you kind of want things to be fun, you know, or something. But and then this, out of everything that we saw, this is the one that I want to watch again the most, just to see if my opinions change, because I really feel like it would. Ultimately, I gave this movie 3.5 stars.
I also I get rated a whole star above you, which is almost unheard of. I gave it a 4.5.
That never happens.
It doesn't. And really, I think I rated it a 4, but I have that last indicator. If you use Scans, my proprietary movie rating calculator, there's a last checkbox for important. And I felt like it was. And so I think that's what gave it the 4.5.
And I feel like I would ultimately rate this movie higher. You know, I need to sit down and watch it in a different environment.
That's also something that I gave Clown in Cornfield. I gave it an important matter because I felt like there was a portrayal of a certain gay couple that is very fucking exceedingly rare, that goes against stereotypes for a movie. And I loved the shit out of seeing that.
Yeah, me too.
And so I had to give it a whole half star above that, just to do my little part in advertising the movie.
And we have to. So, and also, like, I did not see that coming in that movie.
Nope.
So I was super happy about it. After it ends, we head off to see a movie that I was kind of looking forward to by sheer name alone of the director, and that's David Cronenberg, his most recent film, The Shrouds, which had its premiere at Cannes way back last year, and people have been saying very good things about this movie. Stars Vincent Cassel, Diane Kruger, and Guy Pearce.
I didn't even recognize Diane Kruger.
No, she looks different in this movie, and I don't know. People were calling this movie, and they even called it this, you know, when it was introduced at the festival, like his most personal film in a very long time. He hasn't made a lot of movies in a very long time, aside from whatever that one was.
Nothing's going to be good with Guy Pearce in it.
Not anymore. But to me, The Shrouds, which is about a man whose wife has died and he just simply cannot let go. So he created a new kind of technology where your loved one is buried in this technological shroud where you can visit their grave or even look on your smartphone to sort of watch them decay in their tomb.
Jesus. And it's boring.
It is fucking boring. I love David Cronenberg. Don't get me wrong. I feel like
it's him at his most unforgivingly Lynchian.
It is him at his most fucking lethargic. And like, he has made a slow burn movie before. This is not his first time to do that. But this movie doesn't even have a burn. It's just slow. And I was just like, what's going on? What's the point?
Yeah.
Half the time.
And it does not answer that question because it just ends. This movie just ends. Like they ran out of fucking money and just ended it.
I think they just like ran out of ideas because like this movie, I don't even know where to begin with like how it is paced and how it is written and what it's about, because I don't think that anyone really knows. And questions are raised, questions are pseudo answered, but none of the questions that I wanted to be answered. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the movie ends when he like gets over his grief. You know what I mean? And that's it. And in the whatever moment that is, like, and he's able to start kind of moving on with his life for real.
Yeah.
That's when, you know, of course, that's right when he's about to like uncover a mystery about why everything has happened in the movie. And then the movie fucking ends before anything is answered. And I'm just like, that's great and cathartic for you. The answer is it doesn't matter if you're able to move on.
Yeah.
Right? I get that. But for an audience, that is not fun at all. Just fucking journal, man. Don't make a fucking movie and make me sit through it.
That's because they made the movie seem like it wasn't about his catharsis.
It's like basically have to. As a podcast and as press at this place, you know, I have to sit down and watch the fucking Cronenberg movie.
Yeah.
And at this point, David or Brandon, you can shove it because I don't like any of the movies that you do. Jesus.
He really has not made very good movies, you know, recently. This movie makes it seem more about the mystery, you know, or at least that's what the audience is more enthralled with, is the mystery aspect of it. But then by the end of the movie, you're like, well, maybe there's not even a mystery. And we don't get to have any kind of catharsis along with our protagonist because he's the most unlikable fucking protagonist I've ever seen in film. And I'm like, I just do not even care about these people. And, you know, Cronenberg is no stranger to making a sort of like sexualized horror film. I think that's what his brand is. Yeah. And, you know, we've already seen movies like Crash where people get turned on by automobile accidents. And now we have a character who gets turned on by conspiracy theories. And I'm like, David, we need to talk. We need to talk about what you make.
Decaying sister.
Yeah. I don't know. It was not good. It was incredibly boring. Here's where I was horrified. But I gave the Shrouds 2 stars.
I gave it a 2.5.
I don't know how you rated this higher than me.
Because I ran it through scans. And when I factor in things like cinematography and soundscape and things like that were actually done well, it inflates the score.
Oh, well, there was no way I could inflate this because I was just like, no. It's a no for me.
Yeah. Next up, we saw a movie called Cloud.
I'm sure did.
And yes, we did. Anyway, and after that, this is by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Again, like a Cronenberg, we had to see a Kurosawa film because he did Pulse, Cure, Chime, right? Mm-hmm. And these are like J-horror classics, right? Or at least approaching that. And some of that's subjective, but like we have to have seen it. And so this is not even horror or horror adjacent.
No.
As it turns out. He just got into these film festivals, I guess, because of his name, right? And, you know, got a bunch of actors that I don't know, which is fine. I don't need a name brand actor. But it was boring. It was, you know, basically a thief and how he gets out of basically scamming everyone. And how he survives a bunch of people kind of descending upon him to take their vengeance. But I think to some others' points that were made that there might be something lost in translation, and that this was kind of meant as a thriller comedy, a very, very dry humor comedy, in which case, when it comes to like the Asian horror films and Asian thrillers, I kind of prefer Korean at this point because it is almost like wacky. And sometimes when they get to their humor, like as we see in Parasite, some a little more tongue in cheek, you know, and certainly parts of Exuma had some interesting things. Anyway, I don't know what to say about this film other than it wasn't horror. I felt like I wasted my time. I was bored. I didn't like the story. The pacing was bad. Didn't care about the characters. This was my least favorite of the entire festival, personally.
It wasn't my least favorite of the festival.
Your least favorite was Shrouds, which we just talked about.
Yeah, well, Shrouds and Monster Island kind of are like neck and neck for like the worst. Cloud, I wasn't as bored as you. Like I was on board for the movie mostly because I kept anticipating it to get better, you know. And I was just like, it's gonna get better. I'm like, just hold on, y'all, just hold on. The thing is, much like Rosario, I was hoping that they would lean into something that it was never going to do. You know, I felt like if you're gonna do this and kind of make it a little funny, you know, just get funnier with it, you know, turn it into more of an action comedy. I'm okay with the action. It's still a genre movie
wasn't
at
really
a genre festival, but
much action. It was like its final act was really more like The Departed or something like that. Like it was trying to be The Departed, even though it's really small fucking time. Like,
yeah.
Also, I feel like when I watch some J horror, not like The Ring or like, you know, some of the others, but some of these, especially J thriller, like it just feels like the culture is just playing out on screen. Like you must have this role in society and that's what's being, you know, emblazoned onto the screen here. Like the boss and subservient, worker relationship must be honored. And if it's not, then, and it's toxic or weird, then you have to replace it with another one, you know, with the weird Japanese, fascination of having the apprentice that's better than the master because it's funny in a way. And they feel like that's some sort of subversion, even though that's like half of their fucking media at this point.
Yeah.
So it's like I was very aware of some of the Japanese tropes. And so I had less patience for them, I think.
Well, and agreed, and the thing that really struck me that with this movie is that like it got pretty violent by the end, but I was like, it really could have been ramped up a little bit more. Like if there's one thing I like about an Asian action film, they can get incredibly gory and incredibly violent.
Oh man, and I wish it did, but it didn't. And it was literally just like, here's this cat and mouse scene for 15 minutes. Here's that cat and mouse with the characters you don't care about. It's like, stop it.
It also felt a little long.
Yeah.
So ultimately I gave this 2.5 stars.
I gave it a 2.
So I wouldn't completely discount this movie, although it wasn't great, from someone who made something as amazing as Pulse.
Unless you're like a J horror or this is not even a J horror. Unless you're like Japanese thriller enthusiast or Kurosawa enthusiast completionist, don't see this movie.
Yeah, you don't really have to.
No.
And then finally, we had one more movie to watch that night, the last movie of the festival for us, and this was a movie called Touch Me, directed by Addison Hyman, whom directed a film called Hypochondriac that we saw our very first year at the Overlook that we really enjoyed.
And I think it was in both of our top 10s that year.
It was in both of our top 10s that year and was a very, very good movie. So I know that we were kind of eagerly anticipating seeing what this director would do.
Yeah, the festival version of that movie was better than the screening version, by the way.
I haven't seen it since then.
They changed a lot of the music. In it, they like lost rights or something to some of them, and it changes the whole vibe of the end for me.
Oh,
so I watched it again. It was good, but it wasn't as good. Like it does change, and so that was interesting learning lesson. But anyway, I really like this director. I feel like he's fun. He's incredibly self-aware.
Yeah,
he knows exactly what he wants to do, and this is another look at trauma and codependence and addiction. Playing out. You're never quite sure, is this actually what's happening, or is this her story to her therapist, about, making a fantasy version of what happened to be able to deal with it a little bit more abstractly. Right. And so that's what this movie is. And so she's kind of retelling what has happened to her. And, and it kind of goes both ways. It shows that, this alien did exist by the end, but then also it shows her putting a bunch of like, heroin needles in her bag or something,
Yeah, shit.
And I'm just like, that's interesting. So, but this has to do with a codependent friendship, right? A gay guy and a girl who have traumatic backstories, trying to get by in LA, I guess, it seems like.
Yeah.
And she has met an alien who in human form, who has tentacles and has had sex with her at tentacles, and his touch has the ability when he wants to take away all anxiety and pain and depression, like a drug. And therein lies the problem, as well as because, of course, the other side is that the alien actually does mean harm. And so they have to deal with the effects of of all of that. And I don't want to spoil too much because I still feel like this is wacky, tongue-in-cheek, fun, dialogue's great. It's really low budget, like effects and stuff, but it's still worth seeing and fun.
I feel like I really like Addison Hyman as a director.
Yeah.
Because he out of every he's very genuine. That's the exact word. Because out of every director that we saw speak before their movie, like he will tell you, like this is kind of semi-autobiographical, much like Hypochondriac was in some way. And so I feel like when he makes a movie, he puts himself into it. And I think that means something when you're a director.
And he doesn't take himself too seriously, but he shows you what he's gone through in a sense. And it will break your heart, make you laugh and everything else in the most earnest way.
That's right.
And while they're not the greatest films on earth, like they're still worth watching and interesting to see and help us to understand ourselves better, in a way. And so I feel like his art is worthwhile, and I will, every time I see his name, I want to see a movie.
Yeah, I will forever be curious as to the movies that he makes. And
as long as he flounces around Overlook in his onesies.
Yeah, and does like high kicks and things like that. Like, I'm here for it, And plus, like, I really appreciate like an unapologetic, like, gay filmmaker who is not afraid to make like gay movies and make the movies that he wants. And like this one and Hypochondriac, are kind of, they're horror films, but maybe on some sort of like outer level of that. But like he makes interesting and enjoyable movies for sure.
Yeah.
I gave this one 3 stars.
I gave it a 3.5.
Okay.
Yeah. I have more patience for the wacky, goofy stuff.
And I normally really like wacky, goofy things, and there was the way that I described this movie after we watched it was that movie was very funny, but I did not laugh out loud. You know what I mean? Like I knew that it was funny and I had a good time watching it, but I didn't like guffaw with laughter. I think that there is a very serious message behind this kind of silly movie.
Yep.
And I think that's important. So,
yep.
But that was the last thing that we watched at the Overlook. We did not miss a lot of movies. I think there were 4 documentaries that were playing at the Overlook, some of which I really want to see that I will catch.
The notables would have been Drop and, of course, The Ugly Stepsister.
Mm-hmm. And then also the buzz from the people in line around us talking about a very particular movie called Redux.
And for Waka.
And Free Waka.
Which is on streaming now, apparently.
Yeah, it's on Shudder. Like, or it is very, very soon, if not this week. So, that movie is going to be available, and Redux is probably going to be available at some point soon. So I feel like we'll eventually catch those. But we saw like the greater chunk of most of the big feature-length films.
Yep, so, we did. And we, pro-tipped ourselves out of seeing the shorts this year.
I don't think we'll ever do that again.
Unless we submit one.
Yeah.
But this, it kind of really makes me think about like what the year is so far. And I feel really good because I've seen something like 18, horror films so far this year. Mm-hmm. And we're a third of the way through the year. And I feel like it's a really good year. Now, no less than 7 Overlook films have made it into my top 10. Now, about half of these I expect to fall off as we see more and more films, you know. But number 1 is now 40 Acres for me. And then number 2 is Hallow Road. Number 3, Clown in a Cornfield. Number 4 is It Ends. So 4 Overlook movies have stolen, cut in line into my top 10 as the top 4. Followed by The Monkey at number 5, which I saw in the theater. I've seen in the theater twice now, by the way. And number 6 is Good Boy, which I feel like it's going to have legs and might, stick in there. And I'm definitely going to watch that again and see if I rate it the same. And then Heart Eyes, which I thought was a very, very solid horror comedy slasher. And then Ick at number 8 and Touch Me at 9 and The Gorge at 10. I definitely feel like Ick, Touch Me, and The Gorge are going to fall off as the year progresses, especially after we get like 28 years later in there.
Yeah.
Some other really highly anticipated horror films are coming out, that are almost, guaranteed to have like a 4-star,
I'm super happy that The Monkey is still in your top 5 after seeing it twice in the theater. Because, I'm always kind
super rewatchable.
Yeah. I'm always kind of nervous that it's not though, and so and I really, really liked The Monkey.
Yeah.
When looking at my own top 10 for the year so far, there are, some the largest chunk of movies that we saw this year so far have come from the Overlook. So of course they're going to be in there, but my number one remains The Monkey for the year. It's my favorite so far this year. I loved the fucking shit out of that movie. And then number 2 is 40 Acres and then Hallow Road at 3. And that's kind of a tie. I really am having a hard time deciding which of those 2 movies I liked the best.
You have to see them all again.
Yeah. Number 4 right now is Clown in the Cornfield, followed by my number 5 movie, Heart Eyes. Good Boy at number 6.
God, any other year, Heart Eyes would be the slasher of the year, but Monkey, and some others came out,
And Clown in the Cornfield when it does come out. Yeah. Good Boy at number 6, Companion at number 7, Ick at number 8, It Ends at number 9, so it's still in the top 10, and the True Beauty of Being Bitten by a Tick at number 10.
Yep.
So
okay, I could see the True Beauty of Being Bitten by a Tick is kind of this year's. What was the movie last year about the woman getting pregnant or trying to get pregnant?
Oh God, was that last year? Clock. No, that was a couple years ago. Yeah,
2 years ago. I feel like it's this year's Clock or something, maybe.
Yeah, because Clock was kind of a weirdie too.
Yeah, about settling down and feeling the maternal urges.
And the Tick was just much more weird, but
yeah, the title's weirder than the movie.
I really feel like I enjoyed Clock more than that. So yeah, I don't know, but those are our running top 10s so far, and it's just April, and we have quite a few months left to go until we get to our year-end episode. So
yep. And last year we were coming out of Overlook, or at least I was saying like maybe we'll find another festival to go to, but this year is the year that really made me feel like, okay, we made the right investment, Overlook is here to stay, just year after year, they maintain having great films. And this year they really got their shit together as far as organization.
Yeah.
And next year's going to be their 10th year.
That's right.
And we'll have been there half of all of them.
That's right.
So at this point, we're basically an institution.
That's right. Maybe one day we'll be able to have our own live podcast taping. Overlook, if you're listening to this, you can find us at the Film Flamers. Well, I think that just about wraps up our Overlook 2025 wrap up. And you listeners can also find us at the Film Flamers on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, all the places to let us know what you think about the movies that we talked about from the Overlook and what you are most excited to see.
And don't overlook our email address at tiredqueens@filmflamers.com. Or you can also call our hotline at 972-666-7733.
Oh, it can sign my cornhole.
More cornhole? It never ends. Good boy. Okay.
We have other regularly scheduled programming coming out for you later this month on the main feed. It's Horror Comedy Month. And finally, after 45 years of life, I am going to be watching
Young Frankenstein. Yeah, finally making you do it.
And just for funsies, Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Yep.
Because what's more comedic than that?
Nothing, really.
No, nothing at all. And if you want even more content, head over to patreon.com/thefilmflamers to get some bonus episodes this month. And as a special thank you to our patrons, you guys really make our trip to the Overlook possible by
every year. You guys pay for it.
So a big thank you to our Patreon family.
Love you. And my cornhole.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to finally get some sleep after all these movies and have some sweet dreams.
I think the thing I have the most nightmares about is those creaky ass beds that we stayed in.
Oh my God.
Icky.
It was a worse ick than the movie ick, for sure. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I didn't sleep at all. And not from nightmares, which is I would have rather.
Yeah. Icky.